Hello and welcome to a very unique Coach's Corner this week. And I thought with all of the recent conversations and discussions within the social media realm that with regard to pitching velocity, et cetera, I thought we would try to track down somebody that would have a very, very knowledgeable, not only background as a player, but more importantly as a coach, both currently and formerly at the college level. Brad Goldberg was a college pitcher at Coastal Carolina with Gary Gilmore, and then ended his college career at Ohio State, where he was then drafted by the White Sox, played briefly in the Diamondback organization, and ultimately a major leaguer with the White Sox. And Brad, I want to say thank you for taking, I know it's a busy time of year, we're in season, so thank you very much for joining us today.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me.
Very, very grateful for your time. You know, I really want to start with you as an athlete. You know, back in 08, 09, you were kind of in that high school time period where it was the beginning of what I call the perfect game era, and then leading into college. What was your recruiting like coming out of high school and going into Coastal Carolina?
Yeah, taking me back. So that's exactly right. It was like perfect game. Like was getting ready in like Ohio winters for like a huge December in like Fort Myers and going to a perfect game event there, trying to get seen before social media was, you know, everyone said if, you know, they're good enough, if you're good enough, they'll find you. And then we kind of just wanted to go, my family and I, to some warmer climates to hopefully have those people see us. You know, thankfully did well at a few of those. Started getting invited to other ones. Got some interest from some schools. Ultimately decided on Coastal Carolina. I wanted to go somewhere away from home. When I was 16, decided that was not exactly what I wanted once I was there. But yeah, you're right. It was perfect game showcases.
You know, one of the discussion points that is really prevalent before we go down the pitching rabbit hole is this whole transfer portal, and everybody thinks it's very new with regard to today's rules, but really it's been around for forever. But back in your particular time period of the early 2010, 2011, 2013 era, you know, you had to sit out that period of time. But one of the interesting dynamics is the topic of credits transferring. And so if you can just talk about your process to shed light for parents that, hey, this isn't a new, you know, portal that we're living with. It's the same portal, just different rules.
Yeah, I had a nightmare transfer experience from a credit standpoint. I was a sport management major at Coastal Carolina. I got accepted into Ohio State in their sports management school, which we later found out was like significantly better from an educational standpoint, and what you needed to stay in that school, you needed to have over like a 3.5 and certain, you know, credits in different avenues at the university. I did not uphold those standards. So when I tried to switch my major, then that caused all sorts of issues at Ohio State with me not being eligible my second year there. So yeah, like if you're gonna transfer, you better do your homework on, you know, what are your prereqs? What have you done in your minors? If you are going to change majors, do your previous credits apply to the new one you want to go to, or which ones are you interested in, you know, before you're going to switch your major? It's there's a lot of homework that should be done, and I think that now a lot of universities have kind of buttoned up their athletic department and their student athlete support services to make sure those things don't fall through the cracks. But I would say be selfish and make sure that you are taking, you know, the biggest role in your future.
Well, I think it's great to hear this, you know, from not only a student's perspective, but you as a former college coach and now as a major league coach, that really offers some insight and information for the current student athlete and their families. I want to switch a little bit to pitching. At what point, did the velocity bug bite you, or, do you remember as a high school athlete going into college, what were your strengths, but more importantly, upon landing at Coastal, what were your weaknesses that you were discovering as a freshman in college?
Yeah. My strengths were probably projectability at that time. Like, I didn't know what that was. I just knew that I kind of threw harder than most people at that time. I guess looking back now, like, something I always hang my hat on is just competitiveness. Like, I just hated to lose. I love winning, and I'm still that way. But there was a tenth of the information out there at that time. Like, the game has grown more in the past 5 to 10 years, and players knowing themselves, having metrics to back it up, information and the resources to maybe be able to put traits or qualities on players versus, like, it used to be a comp. Player X kind of reminds me of this guy. It wasn't their spin, their vert, their biomechanics, their delivery. It was just kind of like a comp is kind of what I remember. What I learned was the game was fast in college when I first got there, coming from Cleveland, Ohio, especially to a program that wanted to win and win now. It was probably the best thing to happen to me to, like, get that baptism by fire. Very thankful for that. Velocity bug, probably, I don't know if it ever bit me because, Walter, I always had the good fortune of just kind of throwing on the harder side. The downside to that was my command or control was always iffy. So I guess that's where I learned to pitch a little bit more and not have to worry about the velo as much.
I'd like to really expand upon that because, a lot of people are led to believe, the velocity gets you in the door and, the thing that gets you noticed. But as you just alluded to, the shaping, the metrics, the analytics, the horizontal, vertical movement, things like that are starting to become more applicable towards recruiting. Talk a little bit about that in today's student athlete landscape with regard to your former experience as a college coach at Ohio State, now, at the big league level, and you get to see, the difference between being successful and maybe what we call unsuccessful, is a fraction of an inch, whether it's to the inside, the outside. But talk about that pitchability and the need to be able to not only locate, but to have multiple pitches over and above just velocity on your fastball.
Yeah, sure. I'm sure we can go for hours on this. Velocity, here's the thing. Velocity has been proven to be one of the highest indicators of future success. We know this. There are risks associated with that from a health standpoint. At the same time, the game is not called throw it really hard. The game is about getting people out, right? So there's a threshold of, like, how much movement, how big a shapes, how hard you can throw it versus can you get people out? Can you pitch? Can you give your team a chance to win? Can you go 6 innings? Can you recover and be available for your next outing or your next start? So without going into the weeds too much, like, yes, velocity buys you opportunities. It gives hitters less time and less space. That's all great things. At the same time, if you're walking, 3 per 9, 5 per 9, right, and you're not getting anybody out, but you throw hard, you just throw hard. Right? If you can kind of get that big mix of I throw strikes, I move the ball around, I change shapes, I give hitters fits, I have deception, I compete, right? You can always work on your velocity in the offseason, but once you're out on the mound, you need to get people out. I don't think that's ever going to change.
One of the things that we talk about a lot with regard to the high school age or younger pitchers is when to throw breaking balls, what is actually safe. What are your thoughts with regard for parents, when they say, well, my 10-year-old wants to throw a curveball or my 11-year-old wants to throw a slider? Are there any, facts or realities to a certain age being better prepared to throw those secondary pitches over and above like a straight changeup?
I'm going to be honest. I'm just a bullpen coach, Walter. I mean, that's for, orthopedic surgeons and the doctors. I would say this, you're probably not going to look back on your life and go like, I'm really thankful I won that 11U championship. I would much rather play the long game and try to have as much fun as I can, create intent, enjoy while I'm being out there, and just try to get a really good feel for pitching. So I don't know if I have a good answer for that.
We'll talk a little bit about create intent, because a lot of times we talk about competing, but the intent on a glove, locating a glove side fastball, or that kind of. At what age should we begin to really teach those nuances of pitching? I always try to encourage parents, once your son or daughter or whoever is pitching at the younger ages can locate a fastball consistently for a strike 7 or 8 out of 10 times, then you can begin to manipulate a baseball, whether that's through a changeup or possibly a breaking ball. I'm like you, I don't really try to delve too deep into the age specifics, but talking about from your perspective as a former pitcher and then coaching along the way, what's the best way to teach the intent part of pitching?
Yeah, I think the more information that I consume is, I'm a huge fan of like gamifying and challenging players. So if you have a 12-year-old son and you have a 9 square at home, or you have a roll of tape and a wall, right? You can create constraints for, your son, or, whoever you're teaching, where it's like, hey, I want you to hit this X, or put a ball on a tee. I want you to try to throw this thing. I want you to run and throw it. I want you to turn around and throw it. I want you to try it with your eyes closed. I want you to see if we can hit this 5 times. I want you to put a med ball down below the plate, and I want you to hit that. Like, create a game and make it challenging, but also, like, we want to make sure that they do it and have a little bit of success, right? So they get that, like, little brain turn on. But I would be a huge fan, and I am, of gamifying stuff and challenging players that way.
Man, I've been doing that for so many years. I'm so glad to hear someone say about the ball on the tee and the gamifying and the med ball. I love that ball bucket. Like to talk about a topic that is very rarely discussed. It's the mental component of pitching. Lived that last night. Pitching is such a challenge to the mind, and the mindset of having to flush what has just happened and proceed to the next pitch, the next hitter. How do you teach, or how do you work with younger pitchers, getting them to understand, as much as we discuss physical strength or attributes, there's also the mental strength that has to be developed as a pitcher?
Sure. At a younger level, it's hard, right? Because unfortunately, failure is normally our best teacher, right? Like, if you can almost take that mindset of like, these failures are actually opportunities, right? They're less failures. They're just more opportunities to learn, to reflect on what didn't go right. Why didn't it go right? Was it preparation? Was it pitch decisions? Was it focus? Or like, the other team, like, they want to win too. At this level, they drive nice cars too. The college level, they want to get drafted too. Some days you're the windshield and some days you're the bug. So, everyone has very different, chemistry in their brain where they handle it. Some guys need to go and, scream. Other guys handle it internally. But the ones that can turn the page and make sure that, like, their next one is their main focus, are normally the ones that seem to either hang around or make sure that, like, what they're doing has the best, like, trajectory for success.
And one other kind of side note to that topic that I find a lot of parents want to get, back and forth with me on is the umpiring, and what I try to explain to parents, and I would love to hear your thoughts on this topic. We always talk about adjusting to hitters, but we also have to adjust to umpires. All umpires have different type of zone requirements or opinions. Can you just talk about that dynamic as a pitcher yourself and having to adjust to the guy behind the catcher?
Yeah, that's so tough. Like, those umpires, they have a job to do as well, right? Like, if you let them, it's almost less adjusting to them, and it's more not letting them affect you, if that makes sense. Yes, they might have different zones, but I don't think they're out to get anyone. Like, we're at a shortage of umpires in this country right now. Like we should be thanking a lot more of them. Yes, like, sometimes the calls aren't exactly what we wanted, but at the same time, like, if you just execute better, you're probably not going to have to deal with it as much. But the more that you let umpires and external factors affect you, the less that you're focusing on the task at hand.
And I think that is something that parents need to understand. There is a human element to the sport of baseball, the game of baseball, and umpiring is a part of that. And they're certainly not out to get anyone. They know their role and responsibility. What I would like you, the last question from me that I get a lot from parents and a lot of younger pitchers is, young pitchers seem to want to pitch to hitters' weaknesses instead of pitching to their strength as a pitcher. Can you just talk about that, both from your pitching perspective and as a coach, trying to get pitchers to understand, here are my strengths. I'm going to pitch and focus on my strengths and my plan to attack a hitter rather than trying to approach the hitter and find their weakness?
Yeah. I guess simply put, hitting is really hard. Hitting is really hard. So like when you know what you do very well and you double down on it and you're able to execute what you can do when in doubt, you should have a lot more confidence, right? And confidence normally breeds performance. So if you know that you backspin the ball really well, you should probably be doing that at a really high clip and being confident in who you are and what you do well, versus this guy doesn't hit changeups. Well, my changeup might be my fourth best pitch, or I'm learning my changeup. Again, if we're going to the performance factor on this, I don't know if I want to put my chips on that bet. Right? I'd rather bet on the things I do really, really well. And there's like a line, I think it's in Black Hawk Down, it's one of my favorite lines, and it's I'm going to die comfortably. And for me, that's throwing my best stuff to my best locations with my best delivery, with the best mindset. So those are the things that, like, I think you can go to bed throwing your best stuff to your best locations versus trying to be cutesy or extra pitchy for that, 25% ball that you're trying to execute.
You just brought something up, and I just want to end on this. As your time at Ohio State, when you were out recruiting, what advice would you have wanted to impart on your potential recruits or the people that you were watching? When a college coach is behind a backstop or in the stands, what advice would you give to the student athletes and their parents during that recruiting process? I always try to explain to parents, compete, just be who you are, compete, and coaches will evaluate. But can you talk about it from a pitching perspective? When you're at the ballpark, when do you start to watch these athletes? How do you evaluate them as a potential student athlete to recruit?
Yeah, I think you nailed it. Like, I always just wanted to see like the players' authentic selves. It is a horrible fit for someone to fake who they are and not get the person that they are recruiting once they arrive to campus, and vice versa. If coaches are not authentically themselves, yes, are there some sales tactics from both sides? Sure, I understand that. But from an actual, like, if you believe in creating relationships and you're going to be there and you're going to create a home for 3 to 5 years there, like, you're probably going to end up being yourself pretty quick. So if you're a fiery competitor, I want to see it. We can work on that. If you need a little extra juice, like, we can work on that. But being authentically yourself from an athlete and a person is only going to benefit both the program and the player.
No, I agree 1,000%. Well, Brad, I want to say thank you very much. I know we're in season. I know this is a tremendously busy time of year. I truly appreciate you taking the time. I've been asking you for a little while, but I really think this is great perspective and information for not only parents, but student athletes as well. So thank you very much for your time.
My pleasure, Walter.